and welcome to another episode of Comics Let's Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Gibbon. I review comic books and have columns on two sites, the Comics for Sinners website and the Comics Crusaders website. Check them out. Check out my reviews and check out my columns. If you like what you read, let me know in the comments section below. If you don't like it, let me know too. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. My comic book reviews for Comic Crusaders and Comics for Sinners.
And I'm April Childers.
And this week, we're going to complete our look at Star Trek and the history of comic books. Without further ado, let's get right into it. We have two episodes before. We looked at Star Trek and the history of Gold Key and First Run Marvel. And then I had another episode where we looked at DC's run on Star Trek. We're going to take a look at every other company that's done Star Trek since DC. Now I'm only going to look at Star Trek the original series in this program, and this will be my final look at Star Trek on this show for a while anyway. I will not show the comic book adaptations of other Star Trek series, just so I won't leave out those important adaptations and for all you completists out there, but I won't be going into detail on them, with one exception, the Modala Imperative. This was a DC comic which linked the original series to the Next Generation. The first time those two series were linked in any medium at all. The writers were Michael Jan Friedman for the original series part and Peter David for the Next Generation part. And the artists were Pablo Marcus, Rafael Galor, Adam Hughes, and Carl Story.
Okay. For Memory Alpha, Star Trek The Modala Imperative, and Star Trek Next Generation. Two 4-issue comics miniseries published by DC Comics running for a total of 8 issues from July 1991 until October 1991. The company later released a collected paperback edition reprinting all 4 issues of each series with an added introduction by Walter Koenig. The story was presented in 2 phases: a TOS portion where the USS Enterprise crew explores a pre-contact planet undergoing a dangerous political upheaval, and a TNG portion where the USS Enterprise D returns to that world 100 years later for the anniversary of its freedom.
And this is from Memory Beta. The star dates given in Captain's personal log in parts 1 and 4, 3012.4 and 3012.7, place this original series story concurrent with the Menagerie. The dates 44375.7 given in Dr. McCoy's personal log in part 5 and 44398.7 given in Captain Picard's personal log in part 8 would mean that the Next Generation episode Data's Day likewise took place during the 24th century time frame of this mission. Elements of each of these stories, such as the Enterprise orbiting Modala, makes each of these placements inconsistent with canon material.
From a little seasoning, on a previous visit to Modala, Captain Pike and the Enterprise recommended the planet for Federation membership in 10 years. Now, Kirk and Chekhov beamed down to observe any changes which may have taken place. They found a planet run by a police state and are arrested as rebels.
From Tools of Tyranny, Spock and McCoy beamed down to Modala to look for Kirk and Chekhov. In prison, Kirk and Chekhov tried to learn where the advanced weapons used by police came from. They also plant the seeds of rebellion by passive resistance.
Price of Freedom. Spock and McCoy helped the Enterprise locate Kirk and Chekhov in prison. Kirk and Chekhov help the other prisoners engineer a mass escape, and the Enterprise loses track of them. Spock and McCoy are captured by guards looking for escaped prisoners.
In Memory Green, Captain's Log, Stardate 44375.7. We have arrived at Starbase 42 to pick up the gentleman who is to be guest of honor at the 100th anniversary of celebrations of Modala. It is Federation record that the Enterprise, NCC-1701, commanded by James T. Kirk, was instrumental a century ago in helping an oppressed faction of the planet's populace find the strength to throw off the shackles of their oppressors. Once that burden was overcome, a golden age of prosperity ensued on Modala, leading to their present wealthy and flourishing way of life. Although the original Enterprise crew is long since gone, the Modalan government has requested the presence of the starship currently bearing that proud name, as well as the attendance of any of the original 4 crew members known to be involved in that time in Modalan history. Of those 4 who have gone down in Modalan history books as heroes, only 1 was available. However, Admiral Leonard McCoy's status is certainly legendary enough, even to non-Modalans. that we can all consider ourselves singularly honored by his presence.
Lies and legends. Spock and McCoy acquaint themselves with the Enterprise and its crew. Picard, Troy, and their guests transport to Madala for the celebration. The Enterprise is called away to help a cargo ship in distress. During the opening ceremony, Ferengi appear. 100 years ago, they made a deal for ownership of Madala, and it is time to collect. Start date 44396.0 through 44396.2.
The prior claim. The Ferengi create a panic upon their arrival. They capture McCoy and Troy, but Spock, Picard, and Madalan leaders escape. The Enterprise confirms that the attack on a Federation freighter was meant to divert them and makes best speed back to Madala. Game, set, and match. With Spock's help, Troy and McCoy escape. To prevent the execution of Madala's leaders, Picard challenges the Ferengi Damon to personal combat with Madala, and the Enterprise has the stakes. Picard defeats Damon, and the Enterprise arrives to wish the Ferengi farewell. Stardate 44398.7. A rescue attempt winds up with all of the Enterprise landing party and Madalan leaders captives of the Ferengi. Stardate 44397.7.
Several series, miniseries, and special issues of comic books based on the science fiction television series Star Trek: The Next Generation have been published by DC Comics in their imprint, Wildstorm. First, DC did a 6-issue miniseries in 1988, followed by an ongoing series from 1989 to 1996 that lasted 80 issues. In 1993, Malibu published an ongoing series based on Star Trek Deep Space Nine and collaborated with DC to publish a crossover story with that company's TNG series. Malibu also published a standalone issue focusing on the Romulans and 2 issues of a celebrity series of stories written by Star Trek actors Mark Lenard and Aaron Eisenberg. In 1996, Malibu announced plans to publish a Voyager comic, and art from this comic appeared in some comic industry periodicals, including Wizard. Marvel Comics bought Malibu, and Paramount Pictures signed a deal with Marvel to publish comics based upon Star Trek and Mission Impossible under the new Paramount Comics banner. They published various one-shots in the quarterly Star Trek Unlimited series, which covered TOS and TNG. Marvel also published monthly comics based upon Deep Space Nine and Voyager. They also introduced 2 new ongoing series, Star Trek Early Voyages with Christopher Pike's adventures as captain of the Enterprise, and Star Trek Starfleet Academy, which dealt with a group of cadets including Deep Space Nine's Ferengi Nog. In addition, Marvel published a 5-issue limited series, Star Trek Untold Voyages. Similarly to Marvel's first series, Untold Voyages took place following the motion picture, although the original series stories were not part of this series' continuity. Each issue took place during one mission during each year of Kirk's second 5-year voyage, with the first issue set immediately following the events of the film and the 5th issue occurring at the end of the 5th year. After about 18 months, Marvel's management reevaluated the cost of the Star Trek license agreement with Paramount and abruptly canceled all Star Trek titles, including Early Voyages, even though it was in the middle of a story arc.
And now we come to Wildstorm. In 1999, the license drifted back to DC to its Wildstorm imprint. Wildstorm decided to not do an ongoing series, instead publishing limited series and trade paperback graphic novels. Writers included Nathan Archer, Kristen Catherine Rush, and Dean Wesley Smith, Keith R.A. DiCandido, Scott Cienson, Kevin J. Anderson, K.W. Jeter, John Ordover, and David Mack. Their TNG publications dealt with the movie era between Insurrection and Nemesis. Their Deep Space Nine stories were based on the post-Season 7 novel continuity, and their Voyager series took place during the TV series. Wildstorm also published an issue based on the novel series New Frontier, written by series creator Peter David, and the video game Elite Force. Their license expired in 2002.
Star Trek the Manga is an original English language manga from Tokyo Pop based on Star Trek, the original series that began in September 2006. Writers in the 3 volumes included Diane Duane, David Gerrold, Mike W. Barr, and former Star Trek The Generation cast member Will Wheaton. Tokyo Pop released an additional manga based on The Next Generation in April 2009. Another 3rd volume writer was David Gerrold, who had previously written the original series episodes, The Trouble with Tribbles and The Cloudminders, as well as 2 episodes for Star Trek the Animated Series. His story in the 3rd volume is based on one of the original pitches he made alongside the first Tribbles story. An omnibus of the 3 volumes was released.
From Memory Beta, Tokyo Pop have produced several anthologies of Star Trek manga stories starting in 2006 with Shinsei Shinsei. The first 2 books contained 5 manga stories and a prose short story from a recently released anthology by Pocket Books, with Pocket printing a manga story in the respective anthology to cross-promote both companies' products. The 3rd book featured 4 slightly longer manga stories and an extra from a recent Pocket anthology of short stories. Tokyo Pop originally planned their first book to be a collection of tales in the Star Trek The Next Generation era, but at the bequest of Paramount, they chose to develop a Star Trek The Original Series book instead to be released for the original series' 40th anniversary. We're not going to discuss all stories and volumes here due to time limitations, but I'd like to touch on a few of the stories from some of the more popular Star Trek authors. Mike W. Barr has been writing Star Trek stories since Marvel's first run, and he wrote stories for those anthologies as well, including
Till Death is a Star Trek The Original Series manga story from the 2006 anthology Sensei Sensei and drawn by Young Lian. During a wedding ceremony, the Enterprise was attacked by 2 groups of missiles from the lifeless planet below. Investigating, landing parties found a sarcophagus at each launch site, each containing a body. The Enterprise, resuming its mission of mapping unexplored planetary systems in deep space, is investigating a world that, though of the proper age and circumstances to bear life, appears lifeless. On the wreck deck, Kirk joined Becky Randall and Tom Markham in marriage, visiting Dr. Pearson attendant, asking Kirk if he'd ever thought of getting married. But he said he was married to the ship, like all starship captains. 2 missile salvos struck the ship from the surface. Suspecting the launches to be from automated systems, 2 landing parties beamed down, discovering at each launch site machinery containing a body. Random power drains began affecting the ship, and sudden emotional outbursts affected the crew. Kirk and Dr. Pearson argued during a dinner date, and the recently married couple began fighting. McCoy developed a neural neutralizer to temporarily offset emotional outbursts. With not enough power to beam the sarcophagus off the ship, Kirk sent the male crew to the secondary hull and the women to the primary hull. Kirk and Spock found security teams around each sarcophagus and killed each other. Then the sarcophagi opened, with a rejuvenated woman emerging from one and a man from the other. Farron and Nadira telepathically compelled the crew to join them in a mortal battle of the sexes.
Kira Teopsum is a Star Trek The Original Series manga story from the 2007 anthology Kaken no Shinku, published by Tokyo Pop, written by Will Wheaton and drawn by E.G. Su. In this story, a devastating explosion left the Enterprise months away from the nearest starbase without warp drive, transporters, or shields. Kirk and crew had little choice but to attempt to retrieve replacement dilithium from a nearby warning planet.
Bandy is a Star Trek The Original Series manga story from the 2008 anthology Yuchi, published by Tokyo Pop, written by David Gerrold with art by Don Hudson. This story was adapted from a story outline written by David Gerrold and submitted to Star Trek in 1967. In this version of the story, Lieutenant Altman had beamed up an animal, but it escaped from the biolab and was seen fleeing the corridors. It resembled a teddy bear and was highly empathetic, projecting intense joys and fears that overwhelmed the crew. Analyzing it, Spock realized it was highly empathetic, radiating a field of intense emotions as a defense against predators. Spock claimed he was immune to its effects. McCoy said it wasn't born pregnant, but Kirk still wanted it off the ship. Kirk decided to take it to a biological preserve at Cawley Station 3 days away. En route, the creature continued to escape and was found sitting in the captain's chair, frustrating Kirk. Spock warned that the crew might not be able to withstand the intense emotional roller coaster the creature generated. After considering sedation and keeping it in a tethered shuttlecraft, they secured it in the aft section of the ship. Kirk's frustration had been turned by the bear into strong negative emotions that were assaulting the crew. Spock realized he wasn't immune and confessed that he never felt emotions that intense. Execution of a similar premise produced by Peter Pan Records in 1975 were projected negative emotions from an ambassadors that overwhelmed the crew, and positive emotions were the cure. In Passage to Maw. In November 9, 2006, IDW Publishing announced that they had secured the publishing rights to Star Trek from CBS Consumer Products. Second series, Star Trek Klingons Blood Will Tell, launched in April, focusing on the Klingons' point of view on various episodes from the original series. The first 4 issues, based around Errand of Mercy, The Trouble with Tribbles, Private Little War, and The Day of the Dove, respectively, and features a framing story based around the events of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. A third series started in July 2007 called Star Trek Year 4, continuing the Year 5 mission at Kirk's Enterprise after the end of Star Trek, the original series.
Star Trek Comics Info, number 1, July 2007. The Enterprise encounters an immense planetary mass capable of supporting 800 billion inhabitants with only 20 life signs. Beaming down to investigate, Kirk finds Dr. Othello Beck, renowned medical researcher and Phlox Prize winner, working in a vast scientific laboratory left by a dead civilization. With Beck are the benign creatures he had created to assist in the lab. Kirk and McCoy discover that Beck's ethics are questionable. He's hiding a terrible secret, which ends tragically.
Number 2, August 2007. The Enterprise detours to Auric 3 to replenish their supply of dilithium crystals. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were entertained by King Mara when terrorists attack and nearly succeed in killing the king and his guests. Kirk learns that rapid change since the Federation began buying dilithium has split Iraqian society. Spock believes that overthrow of the government is inevitable, while Kirk decides whether or not to intervene. Scotty gets some assistance.
Number 3, September 2007, Solicitation. Captain James T. Kirk becomes suspicious of his crew returning from the devastated colony on Phi 11. Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy try to reassure him that nothing's wrong, unless Kirk's 2 most trusted friends are in on the plot too. What has infected the crew and how, and who's left to help Kirk regain control of the ship? The original crew's return to comic book greatness continues here.
Number 4, October 2007, Solicitation. On Vita 9, USS Enterprise encounters a planet similar to 21st century Earth, where the population has a never-ending appetite for entertainment, and people will do anything for fame. When Captain Kirk and his crew became media sensations, the competing networks that control Biden's government won't let them leave, unless Kirk agrees to a deadly finale.
Number 5, November 2007, Solicitation. The USS Enterprise is dispatched to observe a quark gluon plasma experiment at the Gemini Science Station in orbit between the 2 suns. In an effort to learn more about the beginning of the universe, but the formation of a black hole from the experiment's outcome means imminent danger for Spock and Dr. McCoy, who are stranded on the debilitated science station.
Number 6, December 2007, Solicitation. As Kirk and the crew investigate the disappearance of the USS Pasteur, a trail of debris leads the USS Enterprise to an automated facility.
And now we come to Star Trek Dr. McCoy, Frontier Doctor, which was written by John Byrne, drawn by John Byrne and Laverne Kinzerski. Number 1 of April 2010. While overseeing a refit of the Enterprise, Admiral James T. Kirk receives a handwritten letter that can only have come from one person. Dr. Leonard McCoy has joined Frontier Medics, a Federation program that provides medical care wherever it's needed. With a stowaway aboard, McCoy and his partner, Dr. John Michael Duncan, fly their antique shuttle named Joanna from an Andorian outpost, Ophiuchus 3, a human agricultural colony struggling with an outbreak of infectious disease. As the disease mutates and spreads, McCoy has to rely on his medical instincts and Thela, a bratty and well-armed Andorian girl, to find a cure. Much to his chagrin, McCoy learns that he and Duncan will be babysitting Thela for some time to come.
Number 2, May 2010. In another letter to Jim Kirk, McCoy tells the tale of his latest adventure. Thela has settled in comfortably with McCoy and Duncan. eagerly listening to the veteran doctor's stories and finding a little romance with the younger doctor. Arriving at Gamma Tarsus 7 at the request of Montgomery Scott, McCoy encounters the Tarsians, whose rigid cultural protocols make investigating deaths from a mysterious ailment very difficult. Forced to take a break from his research for a holy day, McCoy stumbles on a secret.
Number 3, from June 2010. McCoy and his team are asked to visit and report on a planet under routine Starfleet observation. On arrival, their ship is fired upon and damaged. Only Duncan's sure-handed piloting gets them down alive. On the ground, they find themselves in a war zone. Thiele and McCoy are separated from Duncan and captured by soldiers. McCoy's interrogation is interrupted by Gary Seven and Roberta Lincoln. It seems that Seven's employers are partly responsible for the surprising situation on that planet. Klingons are responsible for the rest.
Number 4, July 2010. Aboard the Yorktown, McCoy says goodbye to his friends, Thiele and Duncan, who are joining a new research team. Then he says goodbye to new friends, Gary Seven and Roberta Lincoln. Afterwards, Dr. Christine Chappell asks him for help diagnosing an ailment that has caused the death of several crew members recently returned from Sigma Thurnia 38. McCoy's knowledge of DNA evolution lead him to a startling discovery. McCoy visits an old friend. For Volume 4, Alex Hathaway and his daughter Sophie, McCoy learns that Alex has Epstein-Barr syndrome and also has been altering time like a surgeon with a scalpel. Alex wants McCoy to continue his work and the doctor must make a decision. In September 2011, IDW began publishing a new ongoing Star Trek series set in the continuity of the 2009 film. In October 2011, IDW began publishing Star Trek Legion of Superheroes and a 6-issue crossover series between the two properties. In January 2013, IDW began publishing Star Trek Countdown to Darkness, a prequel to the film Star Trek Into Darkness. Later that year, in October, they began publishing Star Trek Khan, another tie-in focusing on the film's antagonist, Khan Noonien. Star Trek has had a few intercompany crossover stories in comic books. These include
Star Trek X-Men, a comic book based on the original series TOS Marvel Comics franchise. X-Men, returning to the planet Delta Vega, site of the deaths of Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell and Dr. Elizabeth Denner, Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise encounter a rift of psionic energy in space, through which travels a starship of Shi'ar design. The ship is quickly destroyed by the spatial anomaly, though not before Spock detects that it carried 7 life forms of near-human nature. A second larger Shi'ar craft comes through the rift, which promptly fires an unusual projectile at the Enterprise. Gladiator of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, he warns the Enterprise away from the planet and drives his point home by striking the ship's deflector shields, causes some damage to the vessel as a result. Star Trek The Next Generation X-Men, a comic book based on The Next Generation, Planet X, and a sequel novel to the TNG comic book.
DC comic franchise Legion of Superheroes. A strange interdimensional anomaly brings both the Legion of Superheroes and the crew of the USS Enterprise to a dystopian future where they must work together to defeat an evil, oppressive empire. Here's excerpts from
Geeks Under Grace Review, in perhaps one of the most unexpected and bizarre crossover choices in the last decade of comic book history. DC Comics brought one of its little recognized franchises together with one of IDW's most beloved to create this 6-part miniseries. A freight transporter accident lands Kirk and his crew in an alternate universe, where the tyrannical Terran Empire rules the galaxy with an iron fist. The Legion of Superheroes, comprised of Cosmic Boy, Brainiac 5, Saturn Girl, Lightning Lad, Chameleon Boy, have an accident while time traveling and end up in the 23rd century, entirely different and more barbaric than they knew about in their history books. Once they are out of immediate danger, Brainiac 5 uses his chronometer to determine the cause of their displacement. He discovers that there is another temporal anomaly nearby, namely the Enterprise crew. Assuming that the Starfleet officers intentionally caused the dimensional mix-up, the Legion chases them down, and the two teams square off for a fight. However, as evil Imperial officers appear, the two groups realize they are on the same side and choose to fight together. The storyline was not particularly deep, but it was fast-paced, interesting, and enjoyable. The fact that the two teams fought each other before uniting seems like a worn-out cliché to me, but that is one of the only complaints I have about the plot. It kept me guessing most of the time. especially when the two teams split off into two different eras of time. As a fan of science fiction, my interest was particularly piqued by this aspect. The resolution did not disappoint either. There were no pressing questions at the end of the story, and the good guys came out on top in the end. Star Trek Legion of Superheroes may seem like a strange crossover, but the writers wove the two universes together well, with its entertaining story, engaging artwork, and well-crafted characters. This is one of those good comic book crossovers that no one knew they wanted. IDW Publishing, Doctor Who, Star Trek The Next Generation, Doctor Who, Simulation 2 came out also around that time.
Star Trek Planet of the Apes from a director with Boom Studios. Planet of the Apes, Makar, Sulu, and Uhura discovered the Klingons and have been seeking to expand into another universe using a gateway built of advanced technology in order to get around the Organian Force Peace Treaty. USS Enterprise approaches and engages two Klingon vessels before pursuing one of them through a portal to the other universe. They arrive in orbit of Earth, albeit one whose history has diverged. Captain James T. Kirk leads an away team to the surface where they see the Klingon Corps providing the guerrillas with rifles. They were detected and fleeing. Corps promises to deal with the interlopers while the Starfleet team return to the ship. They discuss the situation and decide to stop the Klingons. Returning to the surface near the Statue of Liberty, they follow human tracks around to a cove. They find George Taylor, who asks them to help overthrow the apes. Kirk says they cannot, but agrees to meet with Cornelius and Zira and has the group transported to their location. Once they arrive, Kirk instructs the Enterprise to use the phasers set to stun on a large group of gorillas. The two chimpanzees explain ape society to the Starfleet crew before Taylor argues that the apes should be overthrown again. Kirk turns him down, but enlists the help of the chimpanzees. Taylor abducts Pavel Chekhov, steals his communicator, and has himself beamed to the Enterprise. Kirk, Spock, and Chekhov follow him to the ship where they find him trying to steal a shuttlecraft.
Star Trek Green Lantern, The Spectrum War. Two iconic franchises collide for this blockbuster crossover event. The crew of the USS Enterprise meets the Green Lantern Corps for the first time in an all-new adventure that spans the cosmos. Kirk and Spock make a most unusual discovery on a lost world, igniting events that will change the fate of empires. From CBR.com, the crew members of the USS Enterprise aren't strangers to the concept, but in Mike Johnson and Angel Hernandez's Star Trek Green Lantern #1, they're in their own time period en route to Nodal 16, which is a most appropriate port of call and nice homage to the creator of the original Green Lantern. On their way, Kirk and crew encounter an orphan planet, or a big rock as Kirk brands it, that has some sort of reading. While not a first, the exploratory mission to the surface presents readers with the rare occurrence where the crew members who were beamed down beam back intact, red shirts and all. That doesn't keep Johnson from presenting Dr. McCoy's trademark, "He's dead, Jim." Johnson doesn't even have to work too hard for it, and uses the device on the central mystery of the story, as subtitled The Spectrum War.
Star Trek Green Lantern Stranger Worlds, a sequel to the first crossover from Trek Corps. Mike Johnston has taken up the challenge to connect Kelvin Trek to the DC universe, and with artist Angel Hernandez, crafted the first issue in a series that further explores the fate of these few ringslingers, beginning with Guy Gardner, Kilowog, and John Stewart, instructing a room full of Starfleet Academy cadets about the basics of their ring technology. Of course, while Gardner tries to hit on the Vulcan professors, his companions lament the loss of the power batteries that recharge the rings. But damn, if this isn't a cool story to imagine, Hal Jordan's arch nemesis, Sinestro, is the new emperor of the Klingon Empire. Starfleet tries to replicate its own rings. Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris rescue Starfleet personnel from a crippled starbase. While there is so much going on, we also have to remember that Atrocitus, leader of the Red Lanterns of Rage, is also out there, somewhere deep within the Romulan Empire. From Newsarama, Star Trek and the Transformers were crossing over in a new limited series from IDW Publishing, but with a twist. According to IO9, the 4-issue Star Trek vs. Transformers pits two of the IDW's biggest licenses and two of the pop culture's most iconic properties in their cartoon forms against one another in a crossover co-writer Mike Johnson calls several decades in the making. The series will be written and drawn in the spirit of the 1970s Star Trek the Animated Series and the 1980s original Transformers series. IDW published Star Trek Next Generation and Dark Horse Aliens Acceptable Losses on a lifeless desert planet in the Nagagli system. A landing party finds robotic nannies caring for a computer-controlled nursery of alien babies, which Dr. McCoy's analyst proves to be the final survivors of the planet's dead civilization. Fourth series, Alien Spotlight, launched in 2007 September, focusing on various alien races. 2008 saw the publication of the Mirror Images series, which tell the stories of Mirror Universe, Kurt's overthrow, or Captain Christopher Pike, and the alternates of the Enterprise D crew. In the same year, they published Star Trek Assignment Earth, a miniseries that features the adventures of Gary Seven from Star Trek TOS episode Assignment Earth. Also in 2009, IDW published a prequel to the 2009 reboot prequel film Star Trek entitled Star Trek Countdown. In 2009, IDW published Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, based on the second Star Trek movie and the only movie that has never been a comic form from the original crew. Other recent stories include Star Trek Cruise, Star Trek Romulans, Pawns of War.
And now we come to my own franchise now. It's Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. The first novel was Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Basilis. It has been adapted into comic book format and can be found on Indie Planet along with all the other Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter comic books. It's also being made into a movie out of Lakeland, Florida through Crisp Filmworks. Check out the Facebook page, Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. Also, Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Basilis. If you like what you see and want to stay up to date, just click like on both pages. There are many other comic books available on Indie Planet and Drive-Thru Comic Books of the Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise. The latest comic book is Dracula Rising. We're on issue 2. Issue 1 was drawn by Dennis Magnet, who since had to move on to other projects. So my new artist is Rodolfo Ezequiel. I'm going to show you some panels from his artwork right now. Rodolfo is an excellent artist, and these are panels that he has drawn for the Dracula Rising #2 issue. And that's all the time we have for today, my friends. Thank you for joining us here at Comics Life Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Gibbon.
And I'm April Childers.
And together we say, keep reading those comics!